graders. This will be a little different this week. We're going to be doing some online learning while we get to stay home. You can do it in the comfort of your PJs if you want, or your favorite sweats. There's lots of benefits to us doing these videos. Our first lesson this week, you guys have a test that I will be uploading to online. And I will show you guys in a little bit in a separate video how to access that so that you can take your test. I will assign work for Monday and Tuesday together for the next few weeks, and then I'll assign work for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday together. So you will get videos for Monday, Tuesday, and you'll get videos for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You and your parent or guardian, whoever you're doing your homework with, can decide how to pace through those pages. You can follow your own pace. If you want to do all of your language work in one day, fine with me. If you want to split it up a little bit each day, that's cool too. The benefit of getting to do fully online at home is just that. So with that said, because you guys have a test assigned for Monday, Tuesday, I'm going to do a little bit of a review. We have talked about parts of speech this year. There are 8 parts of speech. You guys should remember that. So far this year, we have learned about the verb. The jobs that the verb does is to show action. We've learned about nouns. The job of a noun is to name people, place, things, and ideas. They always name. Sometimes they name specific people, place, things, and ideas. And we give those a capital letter, and sometimes they name common ones. And we don't give those a capital letter. We also learned about pronouns. The job of a pronoun is to replace a noun. The personal pronouns we've learned about, you guys have a whole laundry list of them, but they were the ones that were I, you, he, she, it, and they, and those are all the subjective forms that can be a subject. And then you have the objective pronouns that could be in the predicate part of the sentence so that we can speak correctly. Those are all past lessons just to review. And then we learned about adjectives. Adjectives are describers. They are words that describe nouns and nouns only. They don't ever describe anything else. You can usually put the adjective, not usually, always, you can put the adjective and the noun together and say them together, and they should sound right. Like hot day. The day was hot, so hot describes day, so it's an adjective. The cold popsicle. Anytime adjectives can be anywhere in the sentence, but you can always take them and say them right before the noun they describe, and it should make sense. Then that brings us to adverbs. Adverbs are the 5th part of speech we've learned. Adverbs are also describers. Modify is another word we've used for the word describe. You can see those interchangeably. They mean the same thing. Modify and describe, they describe verbs. That's their main job. And then sometimes they can describe adjectives and other adverbs. Remember, the adjective describes only nouns. The adverb actually describes 2 to 3 things. Most of the time we're going to see them describing verbs, especially in this 4th grade curriculum. That's what you're going to see most. But sometimes you're going to see them describing adjectives and other adverbs. We've done plenty of practice with this the past 2 weeks. So you should know what those look like. If you are confused, if you find a describer, something that's describing in the sentence, and you can't figure out if it's an adverb or an adjective, simply try to find the word that it's describing. And if you can say it together with a noun, that means it's definitely an adjective. It's not going to be your adverb. Adverbs never go with nouns. If it's describing something else in the sentence and you know for sure it's not a person, place, thing, or idea, it's describing something else, like an action or another describing word, then you know that it's going to be an adverb. Adverbs answer 5 questions. They answer either where, when, how often, and to what extent. If you remember back to adjectives, they have 5 very different questions that they answer, not the same kinds of questions. So if the describing word that you found answers one of these questions, it's an adverb. That's another way you can find. Oftentimes, adverbs end in ly. Not always, but often they end in ly. So if you see an ly word in your sentence, chances are it's an adverb. That's another way to spot them. Also, one of the last lessons we did, hopefully you can see this down here, words that are negatives like not, No, in apostrophe T, hardly, scarcely. There's a whole list of negatives in your book. Can't remember what lesson is. I can look back in a second. But those are called negatives. They make the action the opposite of what it is. Like instead of I am running, you can say I am not running. All negatives do is they just make it opposite of what it is. Those are always adverbs. Adverbs, and they usually, actually, I can't think of a case right off the top of my head where they're not describing verbs. So negatives are usually an adverb describing the verb in the sentence, what it's not doing or what it's opposite of what it's doing. The last lesson that we talked about with these negatives is that you do not use more than one in each sentence. You would not use what we call a double negative. You would not say, I don't have no pens. You wouldn't say something like that. It's not appropriate. Don't and no are two negatives, and you don't need them same in the sentence. You guys did an excellent job with that lesson in class. I don't think any of you struggle with that. Just remember, don't use more than one in a sentence. Last thing, and I'm not sure if it's on your test, but I think it is how to diagram these adverbs. We have learned that the subject always goes on this side of the diagram line, and the verb always goes on this side of the diagram line. Always split with almost like a cross, but the line shouldn't go down as far. Maybe just give it a little tail. That's what I tell the kids that it is. Subject, verb, and then adjectives always touch the noun that they describe. The only nouns that we have learned how to diagram this far this year are subjects. Your subject is always going to be a noun. So if you have an adjective that describes your subject, it's going to be on a line touching the subject, always. If you have an adverb that we've been talking about that describes your verb, it's going to touch your verb. You will never have an adverb touching the subject because adverbs don't touch nouns. However, you can have adverbs, and I put here these two cases. It is possible to have an adverb describing the adjective that describes the subject. In that case, the adverb would touch the adjective. You also could have adverbs that describe the adverbs that described the verb. In that case, this adverb would touch this adverb. If you just remember that describers are always going to touch the word that they describe on a sentence diagram, you should be able to keep it straight. You would never put a word that describes the verb on the subject because it doesn't have anything to do with the subject. So just kind of use your reasoning as far as that goes. And then the last thing I want to point out for your test is this differentiation between the words good and well. We talked about in class how sometimes we get confused. And somebody will say, oh, how are you doing today? And you'll say, I'm good. Oftentimes, we don't realize that that's an inappropriate speech. It is. The word good is always an adjective. And when you say, I am good, you're not saying I good. You're saying I am. You're describing am, how you are. And since it's describing how you are is a verb, which is why good is inappropriate, it's more appropriate to say I am well, because well is an adverb that can describe that verb am. The only other thing that you need to remember that this is where it can get confusing is the word well can be either. It can be an adjective or it can be an adverb. You just, in order to remember when it's appropriate to use well as an adjective rather than an adverb, is if it's telling how something is done. That verb do, to do, or how it's done. In those instances with that verb, we would use well. Always well. So if you are confused about that lesson and you want to go back and look, that would have been on page 195. That was lesson 126. You could just review that little box. If you can see that blue box or the orange, these are the lessons. You can review that. And if you want a list of those negatives that we talked about, what the other ones were, that was on page 198, and that was lesson 128 right there. And the extra negative words are there for you. I hope that going through this lesson, you can rewind it as many times as you like. You can look at my notes here on the whiteboard to make sure you're prepared for your test. I think you guys are going to do great. Can't wait to see you again. Hopefully it's not too long. And the next video you guys will see will be about how to access your test, how to get it off of the internet and take it, and how to submit it to me. So hope you guys have a good review.